Darwin finches represent one of the best examples of adaptive radiation. Another example is of Australian marsupials. A number of marsupials of different which are different from each other. They evolved from an ancestral stock, but all within the Australian island continent. When more than one adaptive radiation adapted to have occurred in an isolated geographical area representing different habitats, one can call this convergent evolution. Placental mammals in Australia also exhibit adaptive radiation in evolving into different varieties of such placental mammals, each of which appears to be similar to a corresponding marsupials. For example, placental wolf and Tasmanian wolf marsupial. So, what is biological evolution? It is successive genetic changes in a species over many generations. New species, they result as genetic characteristics. They are modified because of various reasons like mutations, isolation, new allele combinations, reproduction, environment, and this implies to all natural processes they at work. So, the evolution by natural selection in a true sense would have started when cellular forms of life with difference in metabolic capabilities originated on Earth. And the essence of Darwinian theory about evolution in natural selection and the rate of appearance of new forms, they are linked to the lifestyle or the lifespan. Microbes that divide fast, they have the ability to multiply and become millions of individuals within hours. And a colony of bacteria, as we have discussed, growing in a given medium and built-in variations in terms of ability to utilize the feeding component. So a change in the medium composition would bring out that part of the population that can survive under new conditions. So Charles Darwin, he explained the origin of life by means of natural selection, and it has two main hypotheses. One is branching descent and natural selection. In branching descent, the living species, they come from a species that lived in the earlier times, and this explains common inheritance. And natural selection explained that parents with genotypes that favor survival and reproduction leave more offsprings than other parents. Therefore, these genetic traits, they become dominant in a given population, and both of these hypotheses have been tested thousands of times without being falsified. In the evolution process, even before Darwin, a French naturalist, Lamarck, he has said that evolution of life forms had occurred but driven by use and disuse of organs. He gave the example of giraffe, who in a concept attempt to forage the leaves of the tall trees had to adapt by elongation of their neck. So as they passed on this acquired character of elongated neck to succeeded generations, giraffes slowly over the years came to acquire long necks, and nobody believes this conjecture anymore. In evolution process, or is evolution a process or a result of a process? So the world we see, inanimate and animate, is only the success stories of evolution. When we describe the story of this world, we describe evolution as a process. Now, Lamarck's theory was discarded because of the Weismann's experiment. Lamarck's theory, inheritance of acquired characters, when he cut the tail of mice for several generations, the tailless mice, they were never born. So offsprings, they had a long tail, and he repeated this experiment for 22 generations, but the offspring still had a long tail. So Lamarck's theory was not accepted. So there are different theories about exactly how this works. According to the gradualist theory, accumulation of tiny changes over thousands of years finally result in entirely new animals. That is called as gradualism. Those who favor evolution by saltation, they believe that species can arise by sudden jumps under the pressure of an alternate environment. So saltation theory is the sudden change in the organism. So these two theories, they also explain the mechanism of evolution. Hardy-Weinberg principle. In a given population, one can find out the frequency of occurrence of alleles of a gene or a locus. So this frequency is supposed to remain fixed and even remain the same through generations. Hardy-Weinberg principle stated it using algebraic equations. This principle says that allele frequency in a population are stable and is constant from generations to generations. The gene pool, that is total genes and their alleles in a population, remains constant, and this is called as genetic equilibrium. Sum total of all the alleles frequencies is 1, and the individual frequencies, for example, they can be named P, Q, etc. So in a diploid, P and Q represent the frequency of allele A, and the frequency of another population, that is represented here, individual in a population, is simply P square. So this is simply stated another way, that is the probability that an allele A with a frequency P appears on both the chromosomes of a diploid individual is simply the product of the probabilities P square, simply of small a as Q square, and 2pq. Hence, P square plus 2p square plus Q square is equal to 1. This is a binomial expansion of P plus Q square. Their frequency measured differs with the expected values, and the difference direction indicates the extent of evolutionary change. So the disturbance in genetic equilibrium or Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, that is change of frequency of alleles in a population, would then be interpreted as a result of evolution. Five factors are known to affect the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. These are gene migration or gene flow, genetic drift, mutation, genetic recombination, and natural selection. When migration of a section of a population to another place and population occurs, gene frequencies change in the origin as well as in the new population. New genes or alleles, they are added to the new population, and these are lost from the old population, and this would be a gene flow if this gene migration happens multiple times, and if the same change occurs by chance, it is called as genetic drift. Sometimes the change in allele frequency is so different in the new sample of population that they become a different species. So the original drifted population becomes the founders, and this effect is called as founder effect. Now, microbial experiments, they also showed pre-existing advantageous mutations which selected will result in observations of new phenotypes, and over generations it results in speciation. So natural selection, variations, gene flow, reproductive success and selection, all these marks the process of evolution. About 2000 million years ago, the first cellular forms of life appeared on Earth, and the mechanism of how non-cellular aggregates of giant macromolecules would evolve into cells and membranes envelope is not known. And some of these cells, they had the ability to release oxygen. Now, this could be similar to light reaction in photosynthesis, that water is split with the help of the solar energy, captured and channelized by appropriate light harvesting pigments, and slowly single-celled organisms, they become multicellular life forms. And by the time of 500 million years ago, invertebrates were formed and active, jawless fish probably. So jawless fishes, they probably would have evolved by that time, and 350, that is around 350 million years ago. And seaweeds and a few plants, they existed probably around 320 million years ago, and we are told that the first organism that invaded land were plants, and they were widespread on land when animals invaded land. So fish and stout and strong fins could move on land and go back to water, and this was about 350 million years ago. In 1938, a fish caught in South Africa happened to be a coelacanth, which was thought to be extinct, and these animals, they are called as lobe fins. They evolved into first amphibians that lived on both land and water. And there are no specimens of these left with us. However, these were ancestors of the modern day frogs and salamanders, and the amphibians evolved into reptiles. They lack thick shelled eggs, they do not dry up in sun like those of the amphibians. And again, we only see these modern day descendants, the turtles, tortoises, and crocodiles. So in the next 200 million years, or so, reptiles of different shapes and sizes, they dominated the earth. And the giant ferns, pteridophytes, they were present, but they were all fell to form coal deposits slowly, and some of these land reptiles went back into water to evolve into fish like reptiles. So 200 million years ago, ichthyosaurs, okay, they were there. And the land reptiles, they were of the dinosaurs, and the biggest of them is the tyrannosaurs. So the biggest was the tyrannosaurs, and they were about 20 feet in height, and they had huge fearsome dagger like teeth. And 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs suddenly disappeared from the earth, and we do not know the true reason. Some say climate changes killed them, some say most of them evolved into birds, and the truth may live in between small sized reptiles of that area. So the first mammals, they were first like shrews, and their fossils, they are small sized, and the mammals were viviparous and protected their unborn youngs inside the mother's body. And the mammals, they were more intelligent in sensing and avoiding dangers at least. And these reptiles, they came down from mammals, they took over the earth, and these were the South America mammals. They were resembling horse, hippopotamus, and bear, rabbit, etc. So due to the continental drift, when South America joined North America, these animals were overridden by North American fauna. And due to the same continental drift, mammals of Australia, they survived because of the lack of competition from any of these mammals. Some mammals, they live wholly in water. Whales, dolphins, seals, sea cows, there are some examples. And the evolution of horse, elephant, dog, etc., they are the species stories of evolution. We learn about this in higher classes, and the most successful story of the evolution is of the man, and the language skills, and the self consciousness.